Welcome to another episode of Voiced Thoughts Talk Show and Podcast. I am your host and my name is Danette Mahabeer. And on today's episode is our special guest by the name of Kay Jackson. And today's topic, guys, is PTSD trauma triggers. So we're going to delve right into that right now. We're not going to waste any time. Welcome on the show, Kay.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure. So we're just gonna go right into it and talk about some of the history. Everyone knows PTSD, but when we hear PTSD, as you mentioned earlier before we started the podcast, it's normally surrounding the vets,
the veterans and your first responders, your emergency crews, your Coast Guard, police, firefighters, EMS, even hospital staff. I've noticed sometimes get that attention. It's very rarely talked about in domestic situations. There's a lot out there, of course, for sure, but I feel like it definitely gets pushed kind of back. Prime example, my PTSD, it's actually been recommended to me that I have a service animal for my panic attacks because they get so bad. I've come extremely close to passing out. I can't drive. I'll have flashbacks horrendously. I had one not too long ago, thankfully. I was able to get my phone and call my friends, and they were able to come get me from the house and help me through that. And one thing I've noticed, especially in in that aspect, there's a lot of foundations out there for PTSD service dogs. But my experience with them is a lot of those nonprofits are based for your veterans and first responders.
Wow.
I only actually know of one that I came across, and their applications are closed because it's full nonprofit and fully voluntary. I don't remember the area it's in. It's somewhere up north, but it is called the Canine Freedom Project, and it's woman run, and it is specifically for domestic violence survivors and sex trafficked survivors.
But you're saying that the application is closed because what? Because they may have reached the maximum.
They're voluntary only, so they're very small.
Okay.
They don't have 200 staff members where they can just dogs. And there's a lot that goes into vetting service animals as well. You have your temperament, your health. Can they be ADA practical? So there are guidelines in the ADA that they have to meet to be able to do the work in public and gain those public access rights. It's very, very technical. I'm actually still learning about all of it myself because while I do have a prospect and he is showing great at-home progress, even though he's only 15 weeks old, you don't really know until they're about 2 because that's when their temperament really sets in and their health really sets in, and you can test certain things with them.
I'm learning right here. So your prospect dog right now, is it from that same specific organization or from somewhere else?
It is not. So I got mine also, I got Jasper, he's a Dalmatian. I was also just really, really ready for a companion. I had been when I brought him home, I was about 9 months without a dog in the house, and I grew up with dogs, and I was getting to a point, emotionally, I couldn't be there because I was disassociating. Part of that is from PTSD. It happens on a regular basis because I will sit and things will just come up even if I'm trying to not focus on them, just because there's so many layers to my particular trauma situations. And I found my last dog before Jasper was just a companion, but even just having her there helped me emotionally. So even if he doesn't pass for service work, I'm fully prepared to take him on as an emotional support animal and just have that companionship.
Right. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So we're going to delve into another aspect of PTSD. PTSD, I think, to be honest with you, that we can all say we have attributes of PTSD.
Yeah.
It's post-traumatic things that happen to us, and
there's many different
things, many different circumstances.
Yeah, 100%.
Were you diagnosed? Were you diagnosed, or do you just say you have PTSD?
So I have a really unique circumstance surrounding mine. I was diagnosed twice recently by 2 different doctors. I had never been diagnosed, but I'm fully aware with going to therapy and everything that has happened and talking about certain things, I probably started developing it as a child because of some things that I went through in school. Some things when I got out of school that I started going through with work situations. And then of course, at the age of 22, I was drinking a lot. Mm-hmm. I am now a year and a half sober.
Wow.
I had a life-altering event that happened that really clicked for me. Like, I can't drink anymore. I have to, like, if I want to live and get better, I have to stop.
Right.
I hate that event happened, but it did. At the age of 22, I was SA'd. And then about a year ago, actually, it's the 29th, so almost exactly a year ago, I left a 2-year abusive relationship.
Wow. So you've gone through a lot of trauma from childhood, and I guess it kept continuing almost like a pattern before it break that cycle, and now you're trying to turn things around and take care of certain
I want to
things.
advocate for those that can't advocate for themselves, because it's hard to talk about. Even now, like, logically in a safe space, it's hard to talk about, and there are some people that just can't do it. So if me talking about it can just like help somebody feel less alone, I'm all for it, because the easiest way that I found to describe PTSD is your brain gets rewired from that trauma. So it puts you in a world where you're surrounded by people, yet no one else is there because no one went through what you went through. And prime example, you can have two people in the exact same car wreck, and they can both gain trauma from it, but they're still going to view it differently because they're two different people. They process the event differently.
I agree.
So while you might have 5 people who have PTSD, they're all going to have different circumstances. They're all going to have different ways of reacting and
different
coping.
perspective. Absolutely. I agree with that. So would you then say that your adulthood PTSD or circumstances that occurred was a trigger from your childhood PTSD? You know how you mentioned, okay, it started in my childhood. Do you think that had anything to do with the next event that took place that is also categorized under your PTSD?
So, yes and no. I didn't really start to acknowledge that I might have it until I was in therapy in my relationship. I was going for myself because I was suffering really bad with anxiety and paranoia and depression, and I wanted to get that under control. And I started to realize maybe it's more than depression, it's more than anxiety. It's not just because it was so bad and there were so many different things. And my therapist looked at me dead in the face and she was like, have you ever thought maybe you have PTSD? And that's where your anxiety and your depression comes from, because you can't process. And I was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because after that session I sat with it and I did my own research.
Right.
At this point I hadn't been to a doctor yet to actually like get evaluated and have a diagnosis. That unfortunately came in October of 2021. I had a horrible episode. Thankfully, I had a really good boss at the time. He let me go home from work. My mom was there for me. She called the doctor, and the doctor told me, you have 2 options. You can try and wait it out, or you can go to the hospital. And knowing what I had known and been through with getting sober, all the events that were happening in my brain, even though I was in a safe space, I could not function. Once I got in that door, I just collapsed. I was gone, and so I chose to go to the hospital, and that is where they diagnosed me.
Wow.
And they had a really good team. They were really helpful for the 3 days that I could be there. Unfortunately, because I was not suicidal, my insurance wouldn't cover it. So I got sent home. And that is another thing that makes it really hard. You can have PTSD and not be suicidal. And if you're seeking help, unless you're suicidal, if you're in a psychiatric hospital, most insurance won't cover it.
Oh, wow.
I learned that one the hard way. I left with a $5,000 medical bill because of that.
Even with insurance. So you had
insurance would not cover any of it.
It wouldn't cover it. So then,
So that was just for a 3-day stay where I got diagnosed, and they were able to get me on some meds to help. at least temporarily.
What has life been like since you've been diagnosed? So, you probably assume you had it, you've been going through it, there are some things that trigger some things, and there's some,
Absolutely.
traumatic event in the past, but...
It's been a wild ride. I definitely want to thank my crew. I have a really, really good friend crew. There were a lot of things that went down before I got diagnosed. When I got sober, I lost a lot of people, which to each their own. If you were only around me because I would drink and have fun, and that's your decision to make if you don't want to be with me as a sober person, and I respect that. And then I lost some more people when I started to set boundaries, when I realized this is only going to progress if I don't start asserting myself.
Right, and I want to say kudos to you, congratulations on being sober. It is definitely a journey, and what I've told...
Especially with alcohol, because
it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. I visited New Orleans, and it was really hard because I didn't realize, because we don't have hard liquor in gas stations up here, but in New Orleans, you walk in a gas station, and there's hard liquor right in front of you, and I'm like,
wow.
Whoa.
And becoming sober, or desisting from anything in your past, or pattern or habit, a bad habit, it is a step-by-step, one day at a time situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it takes a lot of courage.
Well, and I did it without a program. I did it by myself.
Wow, independently.
But I would also like to give credit to my best friends who stayed with me and would remind me on a regular basis. And when I would call them, they were there regardless.
Supportive,
they picked up, and they would remind me why I can't and why I need to get better.
That is amazing.
And they helped me stay on track, and I am forever grateful for them.
That is good. That is good. You need good people around you. And just to piggyback off something that you said earlier, once you became sober, the people who you used to hang out with and drink with, it is normal. It is normal for them to not want to hang around you anymore, because they're not looking to become sober, at least yet, if any at all. And so you're not living the lifestyle that you were living, which is the lifestyle they're living.
Yeah, and I wish them all well. Like, there's no ill will there. It's just, I believe in temporary permanence. So, like, people are permanent in your life in the span that they're meant to be there.
A season.
And then once you learn your lesson, or they learn their lesson, and you help them heal, or teach them what they need to know for their next journey, and their next path opens up, and you separate, then that's how it goes. Honestly, it took me a while to gain that mindset. And this is for friendships, family members, significant other relationships, jobs, partnerships. It took me a long time to understand, and I feel like once I understood that, a lot of things started to come easier, especially after getting sober. I was angry for a very, very long time, but I started doing my own spiritual journey, and I started to get this mindset of like, okay, things come and go as they're meant to. I've learned, and I look back, and each person that left, they did teach me something. Granted, it was in the midst of my struggles of mental health. I was numbing with alcohol. There was a whole lot going on, burying trauma. I learned from each one of them something that I can take with me. And while I didn't see it at that time, I do now.
Right. That's amazing. So let's talk about trauma triggers.
Absolutely.
Things happen in our past. They're traumatic. We repress them in the back of our heads. There are things that can trigger those to come back. What are some of your trauma triggers right now? And I know there are a couple of situations from childhood, adult, whatever you're feeling comfortable sharing with on this podcast and talk show.
So a few that I have is like, I can't go to a grocery store by myself.
Wow.
If I do, I'm overstimulated for about a week, and I don't go anywhere but home, my best friend's house, and work. Because there are people there who I don't know. There are exits that I can't see. I know my path out, but if I have a panic attack, sometimes they get so severe my vision blurs. So then I can't see, I can't get out, I can't feel safe. And a lot of that has to do with the SA. I was talking to somebody, potentially going in a relationship prospect, and I trusted them. And as life showed, I should not have trusted them. I do not blame myself for that. That is not my fault. And if you are also a victim of SA, I just want to put out there, do not blame yourself. That is on the person who did that. That is not on you. And that took me a long time to come to terms with. It took me about 6 months just to tell my best friend, because I was so scared of that her perspective of me would skew. And I should have known better. I've known her for, at that point I had been best friends with her for 4 years. I should have known better, but it creates a fear in your brain that everybody is going to look at you differently.
Right.
And those who truly care about you won't.
Right, absolutely. So let me ask you, how do you get your groceries?
Good example, Jasper outgrew his last crate, so I had to go to Tractor Supply. So I literally called my dad when I got off work. Hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm coming home from disc golf. Oh, cool. Do you want to meet me at Tractor Supply? Because my anxiety is really, really bad, and I knew I was going to have to ask somebody
to go with
for help. And sure enough, the crate that I was needing was on the top shelf, and I had to speak to somebody. So, but because my dad is there and he's been my rock through my entire life, I literally don't know what I would do without him.
You felt safe.
Yeah, and I was able to get it, go home. I put the crate together. Jasper is suspicious of it because it's new. But I was able to just go home and do life instead of go home and be like,
right,
and have to calm down.
So what happens in the event that someone is not available to go with you and there's something you need? Like, do you use Instacart or,
I try not to, because those have fees attached, and I don't like that, because it's very, what if you're a disabled person and you literally can't get out of your house? Now you have to pay this fee just to have your groceries delivered. I don't like that. Two, I want to be able to function at some point in society, and if that means not necessarily desensitizing myself, but going in a store, even just if it's the same store over and over and over again. I always frequent the same Kroger and same Walmart more often than not, so I know where everything is exactly.
Right.
I will make a list. I will go exactly to that place, get it, and then leave.
Okay.
And that has helped me a little bit. It started off when people couldn't go with me. I would be on the phone with my mom, my best friends, whoever was available at the time, just so I had a voice. Because when it first started, when I first got sober, my brain was constantly, and it still is, it's just more subtle this time, it was constantly in somebody's gonna grab you, somebody's gonna get you. It was just a lot.
Wow.
To deal with. And I had a particular instance, I don't even know how I got home. I probably disassociated. Just as a defense mechanism. I was at Kroger and I was getting eggs, and a man walked up behind me, and I had my eggs. I stepped out of the door and ran into him because he was so close on top of me and facing me. And that instantly triggered me. So I'm running out of the store, paying for my groceries and self-checkout, freaking out, crying. At this point, I'm too scared, because I'll always say, if you feel uncomfortable or you feel like someone's following you, find a guy, find a girl, find somebody, and be like, hey, pretend you're with me shopping. This person is making me uncomfortable. And I was so far in survival mode at that point that I couldn't even do that.
Wow.
Yeah, so I definitely say that there's a lot that has affected. As far as my abusive relationship, wow. If somebody even raises their voice at me, I will start to think the world is collapsing. And that is something that looks, yep. It happened, I learned my lesson. And what's wild, what people don't realize about the abusive relationships, is they can start out great.
Absolutely.
He did not seem like that type of person. I thought I was helping him out of an abusive situation. And I might have been. But how he dealt with his going-ons was not fair to treat me how he treated me. He would constantly tell me that I need to go to the gym and lose weight, that I didn't look good. At one point, I had 2 jobs supporting both of us, doing house chores, laundry, dishes, feeding our cat, taking care of her, taking her to the vet, while going to therapy, having to take care of myself and then take care of him. It was a lot, and eventually it got mentally draining. And while there were some good times, eventually they just started to outweigh. And it started becoming a control thing as well.
Absolutely.
And I didn't even realize most of this stuff until I left this situation. So for anyone listening to this who knows somebody in an abusive situation, the reason as to why is because you don't realize a lot of these things, especially if it's only emotional, verbal, and mental abuse, not physical. You don't realize a lot of the stuff that's happening until you leave.
And it's like the unseen scars. And so I can speak from a domestic violence perspective as well. I am a domestic violence survivor. Everyone who knows me and knows my story. I'm an author of a book called Leave Alive, which is subtitled Goodbye Domestic Violence.
Yeah.
I left when I was 7 months pregnant, left from New Jersey, now I'm living in Tennessee, and different things like that. So I've used various platforms, from podcasts and talk shows to panels to different shows and different things that I was invited to as a speaker to use that story. And so I feel like you're being called to a purpose. Every one of us have a purpose, and I feel like, as you mentioned earlier in the talk show and the podcast, is that you cannot really tap into that purpose unless you have gone through, so that other people, you can relate to what other people are going through. So I could not effectively go to someone who's been through something I haven't and say, I know what they're going through.
Exactly. And this is a prime example. My best friend, no names obviously for privacy reasons, but she has previous experience with abusive relationships, and she was trying to tell me from the get-go, like, hey,
these are signs, these are symptoms,
you
these are red flags.
You need to go. Like, both of my best friends were telling me that. And I had never experienced a situation like that, so I wasn't seeing what they were seeing.
You're overlooking the red flags.
And then we lost our housing situation. His first instinct was to go to Louisiana with his family instead of to try to stay up here with me.
Wow.
I was left crying on the floor, freaking out, called my family, things all settled. I tried to make it work after that, but things with that distance, because now we went from a living together to a long distance, I started noticing things. Prime example, and if he watches this or sees it or his family sees it, I can't really care anymore because I'm ready to share what happened to me.
Absolutely.
I was in the library for 2 hours. One thing that I've tried to start doing again is journaling. Instead of holding everything inside, because when you hold it inside is where it comes to that ill intent, whether you direct it at yourself or other people, whether you mean to or not. Holding it in is not healthy. So I went to the library, started typing because it was getting to the anniversary of the SA event, so I was going through a lot mentally. I had lost one of my best guy friends because, again, I made a mistake while drinking and it ruined our friendship, and I don't blame him for not contacting me again, but I do forever miss that friendship because he was a really good friend. But I was in the library for 2 hours. I had 17 missed phone calls, 7 missed FaceTimes, 5 missed texts, and he contacted my mom over a 2-hour period.
Wow.
That's when things kind of started to get to okay, what's going on?
It's clicking now, it's clicking.
Yeah. And I did take a vacation down there for about a week, and that week was really good. And then I came back up, and it started again. And that's when I started seeing that pattern, and I started getting it in my brain, and I was like, okay, maybe we need to take a break. And he blew that out of the water and turned it into a breakup. And at first I was really upset. I was like, okay, this is what it is, I guess. and I processing all of that. And then he was like, we can still be friends though. And he would call me on a daily basis. And the way it seems that he just switched, like we hadn't even been in a relationship for 2 years. Like, I gave you everything of me. I supported you. I had 2 jobs. I was running myself into the ground to keep our housing situation. And you just flipped it off.
Wow.
So, needless to say, I think the most damaged thing coming out of that relationship is my ability to trust people. So, I used to have a mindset of, yeah, sure, I can help you out. I'll get you what you need. Until you gave me a reason not to. Now it's reversed. Now it's,
you have to give me a reason to
have
trust
to
you.
show me.
Right.
I'm going to read your actions. I'm not going to listen to what you said because I made that mistake and look where it got me. It got me 2 years of trauma.
And nothing is wrong with that.
Nope.
Nothing is wrong with that. And it's unfortunate that your trauma situation has caused you to reverse that.
Yeah.
But I feel like we as human beings and in society, we've gotten to the point where we easily trust everyone with a smile. But
Yeah.
we teach our children, you know, oh, not because everyone seems nice.
Monsters
stranger,
wear masks.
You know, stranger danger. But as an adult, we think, oh, because I'm an adult, I got this.
Yeah.
But, you know, not everyone that smiles has a good intention.
Monsters wear masks.
I like that. Monsters wear masks. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And so as we wrap up, you know, for those who are listening to the podcast or watching online with the talk show segment, what are some advice that you will give to someone who is either currently going through a traumatic situation or someone who has surpassed the traumatic situation but now they're dealing with the PTSD and the trauma triggers? You know, we've spoken about all of that in one. And so, like, if they're listening right now, they're either currently going through it, have gone through it, maybe going through therapy, or having those triggers, dealing with those PTSD. Just give some, you know, sound advice from your perspective, and then we'll wrap up.
Do not be afraid to reach out for help. If you have a friend that you can talk to, that is great. But ideally, your friends are not professionals. They don't have, more often than not, they're not going to have the training to help you in the way that they need. They're not going to be specialized in what you're going through. Reach out. If you have insurance, call your insurance company, see what they'll cover therapy or psychology wise. Go to your regular doctor, ask your doctor, get on Facebook, Google, community resources even. I know Nashville has an outreach center. I think it's the Nashville Trauma Center. Once a month, it's the first Friday of every month, I believe. They host a nonprofit kind of get together where people can present dancing, writing, singing, just a way to help people feel connected and get things out off of their chest as a way to process everything.
And you mentioned that you are sharing some stuff, like some reels and clips through TikTok, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Using that
I did one
platform.
just the other day about like snowballing thoughts about how you don't call a house, or how I don't call my house a home because I haven't really felt safe in it for a while, and part of that is trauma related.
Right.
There's some other things going on that's just personal. I'm not going to speak on for privacy of my family at this point. But like, and it snowballed into like the alcohol concept, and then back to the childhood trauma, and now I'm sober, so I can't hide the stuff that happened in my childhood, so now I'm dealing with adult and childhood trauma, and it's a lot, and it's really wild how many people commented on that had never seen anything on my page before, and was like, wow, I thought I was the only one.
Wow, so there are people who are relating to your videos, so
Absolutely.
I would say keep pushing that, and you know, you're going to be able to reach people who can relate and who you can relate to because you've gone through what they are going through. Thank you so much for being on this show. I'm so appreciative that you took the opportunity to speak on this platform.
Thank you for having me.
And you know, for basically opening up and sharing the things that you have.
And I did write something a few weeks ago. If we have a minute, I would like to share with everybody.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, let me pull it up real quick because I don't have it memorized. Okay, so I wrote this on the anniversary of one of those traumatic events I was speaking about. It's called What is Surviving? Surviving. What is surviving worth if I am unable to live? If I am unable to breathe and be free? to thrive without fear and pain of these seeming to be forever constant in my brain thoughts. What is surviving worth if I feel unlovable, constantly feeling unworthy and invalid, to be buried in such negative thoughts and emotions on a daily basis which never seem to fade? What is surviving worth to me at that point? Surviving is worth the hope that one day I will feel okay, that this weight in my chest will lift so that I can breathe easy. It's worth the hope that I can sleep through the night without tears being ripped from my eyes in fear when I wake in a panic.
Wow.
It's worth the hope of feeling lovable, worthy, and valid. It's worth the hope that one day this pain and suffering will turn into happiness and joy. Surviving is worth the hope that one day I can function without the flashbacks and fear, always watching as if the coast is never clear. Surviving for me is the hope of all of the endless possibilities of one day being free to be me.
That is deep. That is super deep.
If I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be who I am today.
Right.
And yes, to a lot of people with PTSD look like they just might be little pieces and cracks and 100 different versions of themselves. But those little pieces and little versions that have been damaged form a bigger picture. There's a bigger picture outside of our trauma.
Right.
That help us be who we are. And I think I can speak for a lot of trauma survivors on this one. We don't want to be seen in those pieces. We want to be seen for who we are as a whole. Look past that trauma because we survived it.
Right.
We got through it. There's something in us that's more than our trauma that is pushing us to keep going. And I think that's what a lot of us just want the people to see. We don't want to be seen in pity. We don't want to be seen as those pieces of what we went through. We want to be seen as this is what we're doing now. Even if what you're doing now is just barely managing to get out of bed and make breakfast. Even if you change your clothes, you're doing something. You're still going.
That is true.
Even if you lay in bed all day, you don't get up, you don't change your clothes, you don't go to the bathroom, and you just lay in bed all day, you woke up. That is an achievement because you woke up. You kept going for another day. You woke up.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for being on this show and sharing your thoughts today. And I will be sharing this, guys. The podcast, the talk show will be on YouTube. We do have a Facebook group called Voice Thoughts, Talk Show and Podcast. So definitely request to join that group. You can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Danette Mahabeer, on my public figure page as well. We're going to be sharing lots more episodes and talk show with you guys and various topics that are society-based, society-related. And this talk show and podcast is unscripted. I want it to be that open forum for us to express ourselves and not feel like we have to stay in a box to a scripted version of a podcast or a talk show. So again, Kate,
Well, life
thank
is
you
unscripted.
so much. Right?
It is scripted podcast.
That is correct. And so thank you again for being on this show, and I wish
Thank you so
nothing
much
but
for
the
having
best.
me.
Have a good one.
You as well.
All right, guys, thank you for tuning in. Again, my name is Danette Mahabeer, your host for Voice Thoughts, Talk Show, and Podcast. And we'll see you on the next episode.